Welcome to Matters Financial, Geopolitical from a Frontier. Trust you had a good weekend. We've got this extraordinary weather where it rains and really pours bucket loads at night and then gets incredibly hot around lunchtime. Let's see if that happens again today. Hope you all had a great weekend. I saw, and it was really good to see, Peter Greste on Friday afternoon, 400 days in prison, 2 weeks in solitary. Extraordinary mental strength, you have to agree. And he tells me Alika and the Egyptians made me famous. So good to see Peter, really glad. And he said many things, and one of the things he mentioned was what gave him strength when he was inside. And he said it was meditation. And very, very interesting philosophy that he wove in those 400 days to give him strength. Political reflections. Well, France has launched a series of massive bombing raids on ISIS targets in RAQQA in response to what happened on Friday night. I wrote this: terrorism has impact on the global economy. And I said, according to an online release from IS, 8 assailants, one is still at large, targeted 6 sites on Friday in Paris in nearly simultaneous attacks in what was the most violent event in the city since the Second World War. Whether this was the crescendo and the climax in a near-term sequence which began with the crash of Flight 9268 on October 31st, then the bombings in Beirut on November 12, we have yet to find out. What is evident is that ISIS, if their claims are to be believed, has struck deeper into the heart of Fortress Europe and higher, 35,000 feet in the case of Flight 9268. It's a parabolic chart. As I scanned the media, I searched for just one interview with the contemporary French thinker, Paul Virilio. Virilio has written many books, but his 2005 book, City of Panic, might prove the most acute signal in the homogenized media noise. He says our minds are literally besieged by these weapons of mass communications, as Virilio calls them, creating a panic-driven tele-reality and resulting in an odd kind of emotional synchronization in which terror must be instantaneously felt by all on the scale of a global terrorism. Virilio maintains that the global village has created hyper-terrorism as its integral accident. That's a powerful point. Just as derailment is the integral accident of a train. In an era of globalization, he argues, a nation's borders are no longer external but run through its cities. Nations will have to defend themselves not abroad, but within their own dense metropolises. The metropolitics of globalization will take over the geopolitics of nations. Modern warfare is a war on civilians, which, aided by instantaneous telecommunications, will result in a world civil war. What is clear is that the terrorists have broken out of their geographical box. Somalia begat Westgate, Russia's intervention in Syria begat Flight 9268. France has been an interventionist in the minds of ISIS. Once the terrorists were dispensable, their mayhem took place in a faraway place, with a few spectacular exceptions, and US President Obama's 21st century drone warfare warrior was like the gods. As flies to wanton boys are we to the gods. They kill us for their sport. However, the bacteria has escaped the petri dish. The question is, where do we go from here? Are we going to continue peddling the Assad must go line, like it was some silver bullet to end the world's ills? Like the Saddam must go, like the Gaddafi must go, is that it? An endless feedback loop of irrelevant answers to what was really the question: what happened after Saddam and Muammar went? What will happen after Bashar goes? Is the developed world going to simply lock itself down? If Paris was not the climactic finale, then we need to consider how hyper-terrorism is going to affect the globalized economy. TV Monde, ce samedi matin, la France se réveille sous le choc, le monde stupéfait. Have a look at that. Austin Brown, Paris after 9/11. That's going back a bit. There were 8, according to the statement issued by IS and published in the New York Times, 8 brothers wrapped in explosive belts and armed with machine rifles targeted sites that were accurately chosen in the heart of the capital of France. The 8 November 13 Paris attackers wore identical vests rigged with the explosive triacetone triperoxide, abbreviated as TATP. Paris prosecutor François Molin said November 14, saying that the Paris suicide vests mark a change of tactics and a new threat. The war at Europe's perimeter has been closing in for years now, and the refugee crisis has put its open borders policy under nearly fatal pressure. The question is, were these refugees? Did they come with the refugees or not? It seems that they were homegrown. New Yorker again, Dostoevsky in Manhattan. Glucksmann himself wrote in the wake of 9/11 a remarkable book, still untranslated, called Dostoevsky in Manhattan, in which he insisted that modern terrorism, including Islamic terrorism, is nihilist before it is religious, and even before it is political. He attached the motives to the terrorism of a century before to the violence which Dostoevsky and Conrad dramatized so well, which redounds not to a political end, but with a wild vengeance and the existential message, I kill, therefore I am. Nassim Taleb says that since September the 11th, no focus to cut the source of terrorism, Salafi funding of terror and intolerance in schools. And that is the fact. City of Panic, which was the book I referred to, I'll put up the front page of it. PlayStation 4 is even more difficult to keep track of than WhatsApp. This is the news that the terrorists kept in touch with themselves over PlayStation 4. The strains on the world order are most obvious in the Middle East. Borders are collapsing, and serious conflict is destabilizing all its neighbors. You can say that again. Moving on to Saudi Arabia, the expensive social contract between the royal family and Saudi citizens will get more difficult and eventually impossible to sustain if oil prices don't recover. This is the point, that I don't think there's a Hail Mary pass coming anytime soon. The Saudis are stumbling. They may take the Middle East with them. Using its vast oil wealth, its quietly spread, its ultra-orthodox, conservative brand of Islam throughout the Muslim world, secretly undermined secular regimes in its region, and prudently kept to the shadows while others did the fighting and dying. It was Saudi money that fueled the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, underwrote Saddam Hussein's invasion of Iran, and bankrolled Islamic movements and terrorist groups from the Caucasus to the Hindu Kush. It wasn't a modest foreign policy, but it was a discreet one. Today that circumspect diplomacy is in ruins, and the House of Saud looks more vulnerable than it has since the country was founded in 1926. Unraveling the reasons for the current train wreck is a study in how easily hubris, delusion, old-fashioned ineptness can trump even bottomless wealth. As bad as Assad is, moving on, a lot of Syrians, particularly minorities like Shiites, Christians and Druze, were far more afraid of the Islamists than they were of their own government. And that, I think, is a fact. Russians have this photograph, which was posted by the Times of Israel, Su-24 fighter jet taxis at an airbase near Latakia, Syria, with an alleged S-400 air defense battery in the background. That's a pretty powerful air defense system, maximum range of 400 kilometers, placing much of northern and central Israel as well as Cyprus, Lebanon and Turkey in their range. Interesting developments at the G20. Obama and Putin found time to talk at the G20, sitting on couches in a reception room with National Security Advisor Susan Rice. Have a look at the body language, which is a trend change compared to body language I've seen before. Putin goes from G20 pariah to player, with Obama talk in Turkey. Lasting more than 30 minutes, was the first time since the Russian president surprised his American counterpart in September by sending in his warplanes to prop up Bashar Assad. We've all seen the horror that took place recently in Paris, and we sympathize with the affected people, Putin. And then apparently a lot better body language. Putin inserted himself and made himself a player. And this is what I referred to on the 5th of October when I said Putin is a geopolitical grandmaster. I like this quote from Curtis Chin, who I follow on Twitter. One cannot separate the economic and the non-economic in today's interconnected world. This is referencing President Obama's visit to Asia, where they're reckoning that the South China Sea dispute will be front and center of that meeting. The euro slipped to a 6.5-month low after the Paris attacks, below 107 ever so briefly, but since then it's bounced back a little bit to come back to around 107.33. Currency markets, 107.33 dollar index around the 98.90 level. Japanese yen 122.76. The world's third largest economy shrank an annualized 0.8% in the period of July to September. That follows a 0.7% contraction April through June, and that is a technical recession. Swiss franc 10073, the pound 151.91, Aussie 0.7127, India rupee 66.145, South Korean won 1172.60, Brazilian real 384.80. Egyptian pound's interesting because the central bank there came in and pumped in $1 billion last week and caught everyone off guard. And the South African rand, that's a record low, 1438.98. Let me put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index, and the expectations around a rate hike December are very high, and that's what's keeping the dollar bid. Commodity meltdown in one chart. Bloomberg Commodity Index drops to fresh 16-year low. This was from Holger. Have a look at that. Crude oil, $42.33 earlier, now around the $42 mark. And that looks as if it's tilted below 40 to me now. Gold got a little bit of a recovery going on this news, last trading at 1093.01. Exports of caviar from Iran fell to just 1 ton in 2014 due to dwindling fish stocks and trade sanctions imposed in response to Tehran's nuclear program. And they're expected to export a lot more. Let's move on to Africa. Author Pierre Pian said that President Bongo of Gabon, is actually a Nigerian who was adopted during the 1967 to 1970 Biafran War. Bloomberg view, what has made Burundi a powder keg is not so much its troubled history or restive young population. It's the willingness of one man to attach and light the fuse, and the unwillingness of others to stop him. I wrote about this in May when I talked about the spillover risks from Burundi. MTN Group said Nigerian regulators had waived a November 16 deadline to settle a $5.2 billion fine. South African oil share, while still up 2.87% this year, has tumbled 3,410 points since November the 4th. Dollar rand, let me put up a 6-month chart. That looks like we're going to 15. Egyptian pound, as I said, strengthened on this unexpected intervention. Egypt EGX 30 crashed 4.18% yesterday to a 2015 and 23-month low. It's down 26.94% this year. Nigerian all share down 16.78% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down 12.69% this year. Central Bank of Kenya tweeted on Saturday, CBK concerned over shareholders' delay to give assurance for implementation of the reopening proposals. Essentially, I think there was a diktat put down demanding a certain amount of capital. I don't think those shareholders are very keen, because they think there's a very big hole, evidently, otherwise you would be keen. So let's see how that develops. The weighted average for 91-day Treasury bills fell to 9.654%. And I wrote about this on the 9th of November in my piece. Wow, what a ride. When I said in the immediate term and after some stomach-churning turbulence, we have sight of the landing strip. Kenya shilling strong at 102.35. Nairobi all-share up 4.69% since November the 4th, but still down 12.01% year-to-date. Nairobi NSE 20 is down 23.37% year-to-date, but it's up 2.28% since November the 4th. I wish you all a wonderful week, and safety and security, and I condole on the loss of life in France and in all these other places, parts of the world, where people are not safe and have become collateral damage in an awful war.